Twice the price, how the cost of some foods have doubled in a year. Campaigners are urging the Prime Minister to put pressure on the supermarkets to help their customers out, as Downing Street hosts a special meeting to discuss how much we pay for what we eat.
I think we're going to have to accept higher prices. The cost of food has been artificially low, and our environment and farmers have bared the cost, and we're going to have to find a new balance. Also this lunchtime, the UK's unemployment rate has unexpectedly risen again to 3.9%. The schools minister who says he doesn't want SATs tests to be too hard after complaints this year they left pupils in tears. The new call for a ban on tasering children after it emerged an 11-year-old was shot by police in Scotland. And how moths going out in daylight became the beautiful butterflies we know today.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. The consumer group Which has called on the Prime Minister to use his special food summit today to challenge supermarket bosses to take urgent action to help people cope with rising food prices. Which's latest research shows some everyday products like meat and yoghurt have doubled in price compared to a year ago. Today's meeting at Downing Street is bringing together supermarkets, food producers and farmers to discuss food inflation. Here's our political correspondent, Harry Horton.
The cost of farming is going up, and at this farm in Somerset, it's getting more expensive to produce the bread and cheese sold at its farm shop. Labour shortages, changes to government subsidies and energy bills are all having a big impact.
Our electricity bill per year was around £30,000 a year. Our annualised bill went up to £150,000. So a huge increase in energy.
At the other end of the supply chain, shoppers at this community food store in East London are seeing prices shoot up.
The cost of living is very, very high. And they raise things, they don't increase your pay. So how do you pay for the things?
I'm 74 years of age, and what we have as a pension, it's not easy.
Some meat, yoghurt and vegetables have almost doubled in price over the past year. At Asda, frankfurters are up from £1.25 to £2.42, a rise of 93.8%. A pack of 4 brown onions at Morrison's rose from 65p to £1.24, up 90.8%. And the cost of Lancashire Farm natural bio yoghurt shot up by £1 to £2.18, a rise of 85.3%. In Downing Street, food industry leaders are gathering for the Farm to Fork Summit, looking at ways to improve UK food production.
Working together with our farmers, our producers, our government to make life easier for everyone in the food industry to sell good food at great prices.
But farmers here say they desperately need help.
Diesel costs have gone skyrocketed, fertiliser prices, labour, obviously that's gone up as well. I think many different things have gone through the roof, and I think that's obviously where's the price go? It goes down the line, doesn't it?
We know that consumers are facing these higher prices. We want to see what is going on, because it's certainly not coming back to farmers and growers.
I think we're going to have to accept higher prices. The cost of food has been artificially low, and our environment and farmers have bared the cost, and we're going to have to find a new balance.
Farmers need more money for their food, while consumers want to see prices fall. Helping everyone will not be easy.
You say it won't be easy. Do we know yet how the talks happening today will help people who are missing meals right now because of the cost of food, Harry?
Well, that summit in Downing Street's been going on all morning. It's just wrapping up now. Therese Coffey, who's the Secretary of State for Food and Farming, has just come out in Downing Street. She said that there were constructive talks with industry leaders, farmers, supermarket bosses. Now, there have been some announcements today that will help farmers. According to the government, they've announced more money to invest in farming technologies, better help for farmers when it comes to trade deals, and 45,000 visas for the horticultural sector next year. Now, none of those announcements will help bring food prices down immediately, that families are desperately hoping for. There has also been some pressure on the government to look into whether supermarkets are profiteering in not bringing prices down enough. Now, the government not really keen to weigh in on that topic. MPs, though, have said that they will launch an investigation into supermarkets. That will be ongoing over the next few weeks and will hopefully report back in the next few months.
All right, Harry Horton, thank you very much. Thank you. The UK's unemployment rate has unexpectedly risen again. It reached 3.9% in the 3 months to March. That's up by 0.1% on the previous quarter. More than 2.5 million people aren't working due to long-term sickness. That's a new record. And real-term pay fell by 2%. For more detail on this, let's speak to our economics editor, Joel Hills, who's outside the Treasury. Joel, put these numbers into context for us, please.
Well, look, the first thing to note, as you did, is that the headline rate of unemployment, while still, please do note, historically low, has edged up again. More strikingly, in April, what we saw was a very significant fall in the number of people on company payrolls, and that's happened for the first time in 2 years. This all on a day when Vodafone announces, of course, that it's laying off 11,000 people worldwide. Some of those job cuts will affect its business here in the UK. All of this is interesting, Nina, because I think you have to see it in the context of higher interest rates. Ordinarily, when bank rate rises sharply, the canary in the coal mine is almost always the housing market. Thereafter, the labour market tends to be affected. We've seen house prices fall in the UK for several months now. Arguably, what we're seeing is that the wider economy, the wider effect of interest raises are starting to be felt. But note too that while unemployment rose in the first 3 months of this year, so too did employment. We saw a record flow of people, mostly men, out of economic inactivity and into jobs. This is hugely encouraging, but the workforce in the UK is still smaller than it was 3 years ago when the pandemic began, and that figure, 2.5 million people long-term sick, unable to work, that's a real problem for society that Chancellor, of course, is trying to do something about. Finally, and to the surprise of no one, living standards in the UK continue to be squeezed. Real pay, adjusted for inflation, fell in March for the 17th consecutive month. You'll remember last week when I interviewed the Chancellor in Japan, he refused to say when he thought we would start feeling better off again. This morning, though, he's saying it's encouraging. The unemployment rate remains historically low, but difficulty finding staff and rising prices is a worry for many families and businesses. That's why we must stick to our plan to halve inflation and help families with the cost of living.
Joel Hills, thank you very much. Thank you. A man in his 30s has been arrested after a couple were found dead at a house in Huddersfield. They were discovered yesterday with multiple injuries. West Yorkshire Police is continuing its investigation today. Our reporter Lisa Adlam is there for us. Lisa, what's the latest on this?
Yes, well, more than 24 hours after the bodies of a man and a woman were found in a house here on Harp Inge in Huddersfield, a large police cordon remains in place. Forensic officers have been going into the house further along the street. There's a considerable number of uniformed officers at the scene, and detectives have been going from house to house as this double murder investigation continues. What we know so far is that police were called here just before 10 yesterday morning, where they found the bodies of the man and the woman with multiple injuries, and they were confirmed dead at the scene. They've not been named officially by police yet, but there's been a number of people coming here to lay flowers so far today and to pay tribute to them. One of those bunches of flowers has an envelope that simply reads, "For my mummy." And the people, they didn't want to be spoken to on camera because they were deeply distressed, but they described the woman as a mother of four. They said she was an incredible woman, kind, loving, and who doted on her children. Now, as you say, a local man
in his 30s has been arrested on suspicion of both murders. The detective leading the investigation, Detective Superintendent Mark Bowes, has appealed for anyone who saw anything suspicious here overnight on Sunday into Monday morning to get in touch with police. And he's added, "I want to reassure residents we are doing all we can to bring those responsible for this to justice."
Lisa Adlam in Huddersfield, thank you very much. Thank you. 4 days ago, the government defended this year's SATS tests in England after complaints by some parents that some children had been in tears because they found them so hard. On Friday, the Department of Education said the tests for 10 and 11-year-olds were designed to be challenging. But today, the school's minister, Nick Gibb, said he'll look into them after the concern expressed by some schools. Sejal Karia joins me now. This will be welcome news to some schools and some parents and some pupils.
Yes, after the flood of angry complaints and widespread criticism from parents, teachers and schools over this Year 6 reading paper, Nick Gibb, the schools minister, acknowledged their concern and saying that he will look into this test and all of the test papers, the SATS papers.
I haven't seen the paper yet. I will look at it next week. The Standards and Testing Agency, which conduct the SATS tests, they test these tests over many years. They test them with children, and they are assured that it was the right test for the children this year. Challenging, of course, because it has to test a whole range of abilities, but I'll certainly be looking at the test, as I do every year.
But what this won't be is a formal review, and this has fuelled a debate amongst parents and teachers about the purpose of SATS, which measure children's English and math skills in Year 2 and then again in Year 6. The teaching union, the National Association of Head Teachers, saying it's going to raise the issue with the exams regulator and also with the agency that sets the tests, saying that even some staff struggle to understand the question. The government says while it is important that these tests are challenging, they shouldn't be too hard. But the question is how to get that balance right.
Sejal Karia, thank you. The Children's Commissioner in Scotland says it fully supports the UN's call for a ban on tasering children after reports an 11-year-old was tasered by police in Scotland. The police watchdog has already launched an investigation into the claims after footage emerged of an incident at a holiday park in March. Our Scotland reporter Louise Scott joins us now with the latest. Louise.
Well, the video only emerged yesterday, despite that incident taking place 2 months ago on the evening of the 22nd of March at a holiday caravan park on the west coast of Scotland. We've chosen not to show the moment that the boy was tasered, but a warning that you may still find the following footage disturbing. 4 police officers can be seen approaching the boy, one of them holding a taser. The 11-year-old is holding what looks to be a knife and is backing away as the officers ask him repeatedly to put the weapon down. One says, "What do you want to do with the knife?" But the child tells them to stay back. The officer holding the taser then goes on to discharge it. Now, Police Scotland say there were no injuries and is standard practice when a taser is used. They have referred themselves to the Scottish Police Watchdog. There is currently no minimum age in the use of tasers by police, but that has been controversial when it comes to children, leading to the UN calling for a ban, and that has now been backed by the Children's Commissioner in Scotland, who said this incident is extremely concerning. The Scottish Government said it would not be appropriate to comment at this time, while a review is still underway.
Louise Scott, thank you. 3 criminals who supplied fraudulent passports helping murderers and drug traffickers to evade justice in the UK and international borders were sentenced to a combined 17 years today. The group was caught by the National Crime Agency surveillance operation. It had been supplying the passports over a 5-year period. Ellie Pitt is at Reading Crown Court. Ellie, what did the scheme involve?
Well, the men used fraudulent details to apply for genuine passports. So these were real passports, which is why they avoided detection at border forces. And they would pay donors, as they were called, for their old passports and identity details. and then match them up with criminals and customers who were of a similar age and looked similar, and then they would apply for the passports with the donor's details and the customer's photographs. And these passports would sell for up to £15,000.
This was the golden ticket for an organised criminal network or an individual that was wanted. They could travel in and out of the UK or avoid capture by law enforcement internationally. So really important for them. Organised criminal networks are worth billions of pounds every year. So to travel internationally without being identified is really critical to their business plan.
Well, the customers included murderers and drug and firearms traffickers who use the passports to continue carrying out their crimes and avoid detection. And this was the point that the judge made today as he was handing out his sentences on what he called a highly skilled and professional operation, that these men were helping criminals evade justice. He sentenced Christopher Zetek to 8 years in prison, Anthony Beard to 6 years, 8 months, and Alan Thompson to 3 years in prison for their respective roles.
Ellie Pitt, thank you. At least 6 people have died and others remain unaccounted for after a fire broke out just after midnight at a hostel in New Zealand. The country's Prime Minister visited the scene in the capital, Wellington, paying tribute to the victims and the emergency services. Charlie Frost reports.
Advertised as an affordable place to stay, it was just after midnight that residents were woken by the smell of smoke, fire tearing through the top floor of this 4-storey hostel.
Quite worried moments for a few of the lads. A few of them got taken away in ambulance because it's smoke inhalation, and we're just praying that there's no one stuck in their rooms.
I've spoken to one other lady up there, and I know that 2 of my mates have made it out, but the way things are looking for probably 4 other people I know in there, I don't know.
Police say there are fewer than 10 dead, but people still remain unaccounted for, as despite dozens being evacuated, it's not clear how many were staying inside the 92-bed Loafers Lodge.
I didn't arrive immediately, but for the crews it would have been pretty horrific. Flames coming out of a building with people inside is our worst nightmare.
4 hours after the fire started, 20 fire engines were involved in the effort to try to put it out. Firefighters rescuing 5 people from the roof, one person sustaining serious injuries after jumping from the 3rd floor. Visiting the scene in the daylight, New Zealand's Prime Minister thanked the emergency services.
A lot of work over the last few hours to get people out of the building, to stabilise the building, and now a difficult job ahead as they ascertain when they can get back into the building to do the next difficult and tragic part of this process.
Police say the cause of the fire remains unexplained, but local media are reporting officers are looking into whether it was started deliberately. The Prime Minister promising a full investigation into what happened and why. Charlie Frost, ITV News.
The Ukrainian capital Kyiv has been targeted by Russia in a massive overnight airstrike. Officials there have described the barrage as an exceptional onslaught. Ukraine says it downed all 18 missiles, but at least 3 people were injured. The head of the Royal College of Nursing is to hold a further meeting with the Health Secretary as the battle over pay and conditions continues. Addressing the union's annual congress in Brighton today, Pat Cullen said the government must do the right thing to resolve the dispute. And sales at Greggs have gone up a fifth compared to this time last year. The bakery chain, which has opened 63 new shops in 2023, says their cheap meals remain compelling to cash-strapped consumers. Next, how moths became beautiful butterflies. Scientists have discovered that 100 million years ago, an adventurous group of moths began to fly during the daytime instead of at night. This single event eventually led to the evolution of all butterflies, thanks to their new diet, rich on the nectar of plants, usually available only in daylight. Sharon Thomas explains.
They are one of our most dazzling insects, brightening up our parks and gardens and heralding the arrival of summer. But the butterfly didn't always look this striking. They descended from a group of enterprising moths which began flying during the day. The change in hours allowed them to take advantage of the world developing around them and evolve.
The ancestor of butterflies was nocturnal, so they were active at night, just like the moths, most of the moths that we see today. And something happened, and they became day flying. And when they became day flying, it appears they took advantage of the flowers that were flowering during the day, just like the bees were doing. And they took advantage of that, and they became, the butterflies that they are now.
More than 100 researchers built the largest family tree of butterfly species ever created, studying more than 2,000 from across the world to trace their evolutionary history. They concluded that they originated in North or Central America during the age of the dinosaurs, more than 100 million years ago, before migrating to Asia and Australasia, then Africa, and finally arriving here in Europe 15 million years ago. They may have evolved the world over to become one of our most important pollinators, but that's because butterflies are simply moths that started venturing out in the daylight. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
And finally, Martha Stewart has become the oldest ever cover model for Sports Illustrated's annual swimsuit edition at the age of 81. The presenter and businesswoman appeared in the magazine alongside the likes of actor Megan Fox and musician Kim Petras. She said she hoped it would inspire others to try new things no matter their age. A reminder of our main story this lunchtime. Leaders from across the food industry have met in Downing Street for a summit aimed at securing the UK's supermarket supply chains. It comes as new figures show some food items have doubled in cost. That's it. Mary's here at 6:30 from everybody here for now. Bye-bye.